You may not believe it, but the mirror cannot reflect what others truly see when they look at you. Their eyes don't just see the lines on your skin. They feel the quality of your energy, the weight of your presence, and the calmness of your being. These cannot be covered by cosmetics or youth. They are the gifts of a well-lived life. There is a kind of beauty that does not shout for attention, but instead enters the room silently and fills the space with presence. You have likely felt it before. Someone walks in, and though they say nothing, you feel a shift. Their gaze is steady, their movements unhurried, their breath even. They are not necessarily young, not dressed to impress, not loudly confident, yet somehow everyone notices them. This is the beauty of presence. It has little to do with facial symmetry or fashion, and everything to do with how deeply someone is connected with themselves. In many relationships, especially later in life, people speak about the longing to be seen, truly seen, not just acknowledged for roles played or appearances maintained, but recognized for the quiet power that lives behind the eyes. This power, presence, is often misunderstood or underestimated, yet in countless moments of connection, between partners, between parent and child, between old friends, what leaves the deepest impression is not what was said, but how it felt to be in the other person's presence. That presence is not a gift granted by youth. It is the reward of self-awareness, of having faced life honestly, of having loved and lost and dared to feel deeply without letting it consume the core. Neuroscience tells us that the brain is a prediction machine. When someone enters our space, our nervous system instantly assesses them. Are they safe? Are they grounded? Do they bring calm or tension? These cues are subtle but powerful. A person who is fully present, whose attention is not fragmented, whose body is not restless, whose emotions are not leaking, immediately puts others at ease. And when others feel safe around you, they are drawn to you. Not for entertainment, not for escapism, but because you remind them of something: rare stillness in a chaotic world. There's a story of an elderly woman who lived in a small village by the mountains. She wasn't wealthy or widely known, but people often traveled from far to sit with her for a while. Some would bring tea, others just silence. One young woman who visited her asked, "Why do people come to you?" The older woman replied gently, "Because when people are tired of noise, they seek the company of silence that doesn't ask them to perform." That was her presence. Not loud, not striving, but deeply rooted. The kind of beauty that does not fade, because it was never about surface. This presence, this internal harmony, is cultivated through the small disciplines of daily life. The way you rise in the morning, the way you prepare your tea, the way you respond to disappointment, the way you listen without interrupting. These are not glamorous habits, but they shape your energy field. They influence how others experience you, not just physically, but emotionally. When your presence communicates steadiness, others relax. When it communicates clarity, others listen. When it communicates kindness, others open up. Presence becomes the invisible magnet of beauty. In relationships, especially for older women, this presence becomes a sanctuary. Younger years may bring attention due to appearance, novelty, or charm, but it is this deeper presence that holds a partner's soul. There are countless stories of men who describe their long-term partners not by their looks, but by their feeling. She makes everything around her calmer. When she touches my arm, I remember who I am. When she looks at me, I feel like she sees through the noise. These reflections are not tied to age. They are tied to depth. The challenge, then, is not to compete with youth, but to master presence. And this mastery does not arrive suddenly. It is earned. It is built by learning how to be comfortable in your own skin. It is strengthened by choosing grace over reaction, silence over chaos, patience over judgment. Over time, this way of being seeps into your tone of voice, your posture, your eyes. And others will notice, even if they can't name it. This is why some of the most beautiful older women are those who don't strive to prove their beauty. They embody it. If presence is the doorway to deeper attraction, then energy is the air that fills the room once the door opens. In many traditions, we speak of inner energy not as something metaphorical, but as something visceral. The way you feel when someone enters the space is often more telling than anything they say. We've all encountered it. The person who drains the air when they speak, or the one whose very silence is comforting. This is the difference between chaotic and refined energy. And it is here that the truly magnetic older woman reveals her strength. Modern physiology confirms what ancient wisdom has long taught: the body emits subtle signals that others unconsciously perceive. This includes facial micro-expressions, posture, tone of voice, breathing patterns. A woman who has spent years cultivating internal balance, through breathwork, through emotional reflection, through living deliberately, emits signals of calm coherence. Her presence is not only felt, it regulates others. Studies on interpersonal neurobiology show that nervous systems co-regulate. That means if you are anxious, others become anxious. If you are centered, others settle. There was once a man who described his elderly neighbor, a widow in her 70s, as the person who healed my marriage without ever giving advice. He said that simply spending time with her, watching how she made her garden bloom, how she moved through her day with peace, reminded him of what he was missing in his own relationship: patience, intention, a kind of quiet intimacy with life. That woman didn't offer appearance or words. She offered energy. And it shifted something in the people around her. This is not magic. It is emotional maturity turned into vibration. In every relationship, people seek to feel something. Sometimes it's excitement. Sometimes it's security. But as we grow older, what most long for is peace. Connection that does not agitate. Touch that does not demand. Words that are not coated in fear or insecurity. An older woman, through her lived experience, can offer this. She can become the lighthouse that gently guides others without shouting, without pointing, just by being. And this is what makes her attractive, not in the way of magazines, but in the way of rivers and mountains. It must be said that this energy is not passive. It is not the result of resignation. It is active. It is chosen. It is trained. Just as muscles grow with resistance, inner energy becomes refined through life's challenges. A woman who has lost love but remained open. A woman who has been hurt but refuses to grow bitter. A woman who has seen the world change around her but stays true to her values. These choices shape the energetic body. They allow her to walk through a room with quiet dignity, to speak slowly and mean it, to smile without needing anything in return. Psychology refers to this as earned secure attachment. Unlike those who were gifted emotional safety in youth, some people develop it later in life, through intentional healing, through reflection, through community. It is this secure presence that others crave. In romantic relationships, this translates into a magnetic stability. In friendships, it becomes a foundation of trust. In family, it becomes the sacred bond that holds generations together. And in oneself, it becomes the seed of peace that no external change can disturb. In one study, participants were asked to rate attractiveness based on videos where sound was muted. Surprisingly, those who moved with calm intention, who held pauses with comfort, who made eye contact without force, were consistently rated as more attractive, regardless of age or physical features. This tells us something vital: how you inhabit your body matters. How you breathe when no one is watching, how you carry yourself when you feel invisible. These things shape the energy you send. And people respond to energy before they even understand why. You might recall a moment in your own life where someone said to you, "There's just something about you," and they couldn't explain what it was. That something was likely not your hairstyle or your clothing. It was your energy in that moment. Maybe you were aligned with purpose. Maybe you had accepted something you used to fight. Maybe you had forgiven someone or yourself. That kind of inner shift becomes visible. It is what gives older women an edge that youth cannot imitate, the grace of having walked through fire and come out not burned but brighter. So, when you hear someone say, "You're beautiful," and your mind rushes to deny it, pause. Ask yourself, what if they are not seeing your reflection, but your essence? What if their eyes are responding not to youth, but to energy? What if beauty at this stage in life is not about being seen, but about how deeply you see? Not about the noise you make, but about the silence you hold. There is a sacred invitation in aging that few accept. The invitation to become energy refined, not in the way of control or suppression, but in the way of harmony. To become someone who no longer reacts to every storm, but instead becomes the calm inside it. Someone who no longer tries to impress, but instead expresses. Someone who no longer hides behind roles, but lives from truth. In the tapestry of relationships, such a woman becomes the thread of gold, not loud, not always visible, but holding everything together. She reminds others what is possible when we stop chasing approval and begin living from center. She is not beautiful despite her age. She is beautiful because of how she has allowed time to sculpt her into someone real. And in this way, presence and energy are not separate signs. They are one flowing stream. The deeper your presence, the more refined your energy. The more refined your energy, the more deeply others are drawn to your presence. This is the loop of authentic beauty. Not linear, not fading, but eternal. The kind of beauty that, once discovered, can never be lost. There is a particular kind of calm that enters a relationship not with words, but with emotional stability. It is the calm that does not react quickly, does not take things personally, and does not rely on others for validation. This calm is not the absence of feeling, it is the full awareness of it, acknowledged, held, but not allowed to rule. Emotional stability, especially in an older woman, becomes a sanctuary for those around her. It becomes the silent assurance that storms will pass and that connection, when rooted in clarity, does not need to fear the winds of misunderstanding. In a world that thrives on speed, reactivity, and constant stimulation, stability is a rare and magnetic force. It is what people long for when their lives feel out of control. In romantic partnerships, it creates a foundation upon which trust can be built, not through grand gestures, but through consistency in energy. In friendships, it invites openness because it carries no threat of judgment. In parenting and family, it becomes the guiding pulse of safety, teaching others, without ever saying it directly, that one can be strong and gentle at the same time. Emotional regulation is not a personality trait you are born with. It is a skill, a discipline, a form of self-respect. Neuroscience shows us that the prefrontal cortex, the area of the brain responsible for emotional regulation, can be strengthened through mindfulness, breathing practices, and conscious reflection. Over time, a woman who has learned to observe her emotional landscape without drowning in it becomes a force of gravity. People feel drawn to her not because she seeks attention, but because she holds space. And in relationships, that ability to hold space becomes the oxygen for intimacy. There's a story of a man who had been through a difficult divorce. Years later, he remarried. When asked what felt different about his second marriage, he replied, "She doesn't make me feel like I'm being tested all the time. She just allows me to be, and somehow that makes me want to be better. That's the quiet power of emotional maturity. It doesn't chase change. It doesn't manipulate outcomes. It influences not through pressure, but through presence. When a woman embodies this, others find their own nervous systems relaxing. Their walls soften, communication deepens. Emotional stability also offers something deeper: resilience. Relationships are not without conflict. They are not meant to be, but the difference lies in how conflict is handled. A woman who has spent years observing her own triggers, who knows the difference between projection and truth, who has developed the patience to pause before reacting. She brings light into situations where others would bring fire. She knows that tone matters more than timing, that silence sometimes speaks louder than explanations, and that not every battle is worth fighting, especially when peace is the greater victory. This kind of emotional strength does not come from having avoided pain. It often comes precisely because of it, because she has endured heartbreak, loss, rejection, and instead of turning bitter, she turned inward. She studied her responses. She noticed her patterns. She grew. This woman no longer needs to control others to feel safe. Her safety comes from the ground she stands on inside herself. And that steadiness is felt. When she speaks, her words carry weight not because they are loud, but because they are clear. Psychologically, people are most drawn to others who offer a regulated presence. Children seek parents who are not reactive, but receptive. Partners seek companionship that does not escalate their anxiety, but reduces it. Friends stay close to those who listen not to respond, but to understand. This kind of presence can only emerge when emotional discipline has been cultivated, and it is often in older women, those who have been weathered by time and softened by self-reflection, that this quality becomes most visible. A woman who possesses emotional regulation is also able to create boundaries without building walls. She knows the sacred balance between openness and protection. She does not say yes to everything, nor does she retreat from discomfort. Her boundaries are not demands, they are declarations of self-awareness. And because she honors her own energy, others learn to honor it too. In relationships, this makes her not only respected, but deeply trusted. People feel safe to be themselves around her because she has made peace with herself first. She understands that love is not proven through sacrifice, but through sustainability. That to truly love another, one must not abandon oneself. This understanding reframes everything: how she gives, how she receives, how she forgives. She no longer enters conversations to win, but to connect. No longer seeks to be understood before she understands. And this orientation creates a field of deep emotional intimacy, one that many chase through dramatic gestures, but never truly arrive at because they have not yet found it within. From a physiological perspective, her breath is even, her body language open, her presence unhurried. These are the signs of a nervous system that has been trained to return to baseline. She knows when to step away, when to reflect, when to speak. And because her communication comes from this calm inner space, even hard truths are received with respect. It is not what she says, but how she says it. And more often than not, she says just enough and no more. Her words are not coded in need. They are laced with truth. This emotional gravity creates a field of magnetism. In romantic life, it is especially powerful. There is a myth that passion comes from intensity, from drama, from uncertainty. But the deepest forms of attraction, especially as people grow older, arise from emotional safety. The space where one can rest, not because life is easy, but because love does not require a mask. A woman who brings this emotional safety becomes unforgettable, not for what she demands, but for what she allows others to feel in her presence. And then there is wisdom, the kind that cannot be rushed, the kind that ripens slowly, like fruit on a tree that grows year after year, weathering each season with grace. Wisdom becomes visible not through declarations, but through behavior. A wise woman does not need to remind you of her years. Her way of living reveals them. She listens more than she speaks. She sees more than she says. She smiles, not out of politeness, but from the quiet joy of understanding what really matters. In this sense, wisdom is profoundly attractive. It invites respect, not because it demands it, but because it has earned it. The face of a wise woman is not untouched by time. It carries lines, yes, but those lines are stories. Evidence of laughter, of tears, of long nights, holding others through pain, of early mornings, choosing to begin again. There is more depth in one kind wrinkle than in 1,000 airbrushed portraits, because it tells the truth. And truth, when lived with courage, is beautiful. People seek wisdom, often without realizing it. A partner who listens without judging. A friend who tells you the truth, not to harm, but to help. A mentor who says, you already know what to do, because she trusts your process. These roles are not about being superior. They are about being present, about having walked enough paths to recognize which ones are dead ends. And when an older woman carries this wisdom with humility, she becomes the mirror others didn't know they needed. She is not threatened by the confidence of youth. She blesses it. But she no longer competes with it. She knows that confidence without wisdom is like a flame without direction. It burns quickly, brightly, and then it fades. Her wisdom gives shape to the flame. She teaches not with force, but with example. And in relationships, she becomes the silent compass that points toward depth. Her value is not always seen immediately, but once seen, it is never forgotten. There's an old saying, a woman's beauty is in her hands. It refers not to softness, but to what her hands have done, what they have held, healed, created, endured. Wisdom lives in action. It lives in the way she shows up, in the way she doesn't need attention to feel alive, in the way she chooses her battles, her words, her silences. It lives in her eyes, not because they sparkle, but because they reflect everything she has seen and still chosen to love. In many traditional cultures, elders are sought for guidance, not because they have all the answers, but because they carry a certain kind of silence, a silence that says, I've been where you are, a silence that does not rush to fix, but invites you to reflect. This kind of presence creates a different dynamic in relationships. It removes the chaos of expectations and replaces it with depth, curiosity, patience. And people, even those unaware of what they seek, feel it. They are drawn not to surface, but to soul. A wise woman does not try to impress you with what she knows. She tries to understand what you need to remember. In this way, wisdom becomes a gift of service, not performance. A light that does not blind, but gently illuminates the next step. And when she speaks, it is not to be admired, but to awaken something in you. That is her beauty. She does not center herself, and in doing so, others feel centered around her. There was once a grandmother who, when her family gathered, would say almost nothing during meals. But when someone was struggling, they would always find themselves sitting at her kitchen table. She would pour tea, not slowly, and say only a few words. But those words would land like seeds. Days later, clarity would bloom, not because she solved the problem, but because she reminded them of their strength. That is wisdom. It doesn't steal your power, it returns it to you. And so, when people wonder what makes an older woman beautiful, the answer cannot be contained in a mirror. It must be found in the way others feel when she enters a room, in the peace she brings, in the truth she holds, in the steadiness of her presence and the depth of her knowing. Her face may no longer reflect the youth she once had, but it reflects something far greater, the journey she has taken to return to herself. And in that return, she becomes luminous. There is a quiet power that resides in harmony, not in dominance, not in control, but in the ability to align with the natural rhythm of life. The world often conditions women to believe that beauty lies in perfection. Flawless skin, perfect posture, effortless style. But as the seasons pass, perfection begins to lose its relevance. It fades like makeup in the rain. And what remains is something deeper, something that cannot be manufactured, an inner balance that transforms how a woman moves, how she speaks, how she relates. This harmony, once embraced, becomes one of the most magnetic forces in her presence. Eastern traditions speak of this harmony as the embodiment of yin, the receptive, flowing, intuitive principle that, when cultivated, becomes more powerful than force. In younger years, energy is often spent outwardly, trying to prove worth, attract attention, secure affection. But with age, and only if the heart is willing, the energy begins to return inward. A woman starts listening more to herself than to the noise around her. She begins to trust the rhythm of her own body, her own breath, her own sense of timing. This self-honoring rhythm is the essence of true femininity. In relationships, harmony is not passivity, it is awareness. It is knowing when to act and when to step back, when to speak and when to hold space, when to offer comfort and when to let someone face their own lesson. This discernment does not come from books or theories. It comes from presence, from being deeply attuned not only to others, but first and foremost to oneself. The woman who embodies this doesn't need to convince anyone of her value. She knows it, not as an idea, but as a way of being. There was once an elderly couple who had been together for over 50 years. When asked the secret to their enduring bond, the wife said, "I learned early on that peace is not the absence of disagreement, it's the presence of rhythm. Like a dance. We step on each other's toes sometimes, but we keep dancing because we listen to the music more than to our mistakes." That music, for a woman in her later years, is often heard more clearly. Her steps are no longer hurried by insecurity. Her movements no longer directed by fear. She becomes the dancer who knows the floor beneath her feet. Physiologically, the body reflects this harmony. The shoulders are no longer tense from trying to carry everything alone. The breath is deeper. The voice is softer yet more certain. People are drawn to her not because she has all the answers, but because her presence invites a sense of enoughness. She is not competing. She is not comparing. She is not seeking approval. And because of that, others begin to feel more at home in themselves when they are with her. This harmony also allows for contradiction. A woman in balance can be strong and gentle, direct and kind, wise and playful. She does not fragment herself to fit expectations. She contains multitudes. And in relationships, this wholeness becomes a rare and beautiful gift. Her partner does not have to guess who she is, because she is rooted. Her friends do not have to wonder if she means what she says, because her words and energy align. Her family feels the ground of her presence, even when she is silent. That is the influence of internal coherence. What changes with age is not merely the appearance. It is the tone of the spirit. A younger woman may seek validation through charm or beauty. An older woman, once she has stepped into her wholeness, offers validation through presence. She becomes the space where others exhale, where masks fall away. And in that space, relationships evolve, no longer based on performance, but on truth, no longer driven by need, but by resonance. This is how harmony becomes attractive, not as something seen, but as something felt in every interaction. And yet, none of this is possible without the foundation of self-respect. For a woman to move through life in harmony, she must first reclaim herself, her time, her boundaries, her energy. Self-respect is not arrogance. it is alignment. It is knowing that who she is, how she feels, and what she values are worthy of space in the world. Many women are taught to shrink, to compromise too early, to silence their intuition for the sake of peace. But peace that demands self-abandonment is not peace. It is performance. And eventually, the soul begins to ache under the weight of pretending. Self-respect, especially in older age, becomes a gateway to sensuality. Not in the narrow, commercial sense of the word, but in its truest meaning, the capacity to fully feel, to be present in one's body, to move and touch and speak with intention. A woman who respects herself nourishes her body, not to impress, but to honor it. She speaks not to please, but to express. She dresses not for approval, but for authenticity. And in this state of self-honoring, her sensuality becomes magnetic. Others respond not to her appearance, but to her aliveness. In relationships, this self-respect creates a powerful dynamic. She no longer tolerates what diminishes her spirit. She no longer explains away bad behavior. She no longer confuses love with rescue. Instead, she invites mutual growth, mutual accountability, mutual reverence. And because she holds herself with care, others rise to meet her where she stands. She teaches people how to treat her, not through demands, but through the quiet clarity of her own example. There's a story of a woman in her 70s who lived alone after her husband passed. One of her neighbors, a younger man, once asked, "Don't you get lonely?" She smiled and replied, "No, I get quiet. There's a difference. Loneliness comes when you don't enjoy your own company. Quiet is the reward of being able to sit with yourself and feel peace." That peace did not arrive accidentally. It was earned through decades of choosing herself, not above others, but alongside them. Not out of pride, but out of respect for the sacredness of her own presence. In psychology, we speak of self-concept, the internal picture one holds of themselves. When that picture is distorted by shame, guilt, or rejection, relationships become tangled. One seeks constant reassurance, fears abandonment, or overcompensates. But when the self-concept is strong, rooted in truth, shaped by growth, colored by compassion, relationships become places of exchange, not extraction. A woman with high self-respect is not afraid to walk away from situations that dishonor her. But more importantly, she is not afraid to walk toward herself, to choose her own well-being even when others don't understand. This way of being becomes sensual in its own right. To sit in a room with someone who radiates self-respect